It isn't uncommon for people to mix up mitosis or meiosis, where it's used, what it's used for. So what I want to do today is to look back over very, very, very briefly what mitosis and meiosis are, pair them, and then pop all that information into the table, which is on the very last slide. Okay, this should take no more than 10 minutes. Okay, so we already know about chromosomes. We know that they're in the nucleus in every cell, apart from red blood cells, that the standard number of chromosomes in a human body cell is 23 pairs, half from your mother, half from your father. What it's known as, known as a homologous pair. Okay, so that means that they're identical, homologous, except your sex chromosomes. So if you're female, then they are homologous, and they are two X chromosomes. But they're not completely identical because you'll have one X chromosome from your mother, one X chromosome from your father. If you're male, then they definitely won't be homologous because one is X and one is Y. A karyotype is a picture of your genome, and that genome shows 23 pairs of chromosomes, where one of the pairs is a sex chromosome. Okay, so this one's female because it's XX. But cells are constantly needed. The nucleus of each cell that contains the DNA that codes that cell, tells that cell what to do, needs to be replicated and passed on to new cells. Okay, all the new cells must do exactly the same job as the original, so they need the exact same DNA. So that's where we're first going to look at mitosis. Mitosis is a type of very basic cell division that happens in every single normal body cell except for the sex cells. Okay, overall, it's just the splitting of a cell into two identical daughter cells, they're called, and those daughter cells have an identical genome to the original. It's very rapid, happens all the time. Things like skin cells, the skin cells that are on the surface of your skin are actually dead. There's multiple layers of cells that you have to go through on your skin to get down to the cells that are alive, and those cells that are alive are constantly replicating, which is why we lose so much skin cells all the time. We always lose it and exfoliate. With mitosis, you normally see diagrams like this, where you've got your first diploid set. So diploid just means double. So you've got your two sets of chromosomes here. Then they replicate. Okay, they replicate. So now you've got 4 copies of every single chromosome, and then they just divide, split completely down the middle. Half goes to one cell, half goes to the other. So you end up with 2 cells. If we compare it to the original cell, is exactly the same. Okay, it is an identical daughter cell, and we've got 2 identical daughter cells that have identical chromosomes. Now, these diagrams can sometimes confuse people because, you know, we don't have 4 chromosomes, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. So I've just put this together. Next slide. That looks at our karyotype. Okay, so here's our karyotype of all of our chromosomes, and all that happens in mitosis. First, everything's doubled. All those chromosomes are replicated. So now we have 46 pairs of chromosomes. Okay, once all those chromosomes have replicated, it's very simple that they just split. Okay, so half of those chromosomes go to one cell, half of the chromosomes go to the second cell, and actually they're all identical. Both of these cells are identical to the first one. So we've got chromosomes in the nucleus are copied. Then they line up down the center of that cell ready for division. And again, it's a very simplified diagram. Imagine that we've got our 23 pairs on either side here, lining up down the center of the cell, ready to get pulled apart. Again, pulled apart to separate as part of cell division. And we end up with 2 cells that are identical to the first. Now, in these diagrams, you can always see the starter cell and the end daughter cells will look identical. We've got exactly the same stuff inside. Okay, so identical diploid. They're diploid because we've finished with 23 pairs. We've finished with 2 sets of every chromosome. Okay, that is diploid 2. Now, This is important because of differentiation, because all the cells in our body aren't just standard cells, they all need to do something, okay? And if a cell can multiply, then the new cell will be differentiated. And a differentiation just means to change, to be specialized into a cell that does a specific job. So a brain cell is a specialized, differentiated version to a normal bog standard animal cell that we see and draw in our books and label so many times. The same for a heart cell, the same for a hair follicle cell. They've all differentiated to produce sort of a different job. These cells are specialized very early on. And because you need to replicate heart cells, because you need to replicate hair follicle cells and liver cells, etc., those cells will be best placed to just replicate themselves because it's an already specialized cell that is replicating and dividing into two specialized cells. We don't have to differentiate all the time. So this mitosis is very, very useful to take a differentiated cell and make two differentiated cells that are identical. The two types of differentiated cells, specialized cells, that don't form during mitosis are the sperm and the egg. Okay, the technical name for a sperm is a spermatozoa. Technical name for an egg cell is an ovum. And these cells need to be reproduced by a different method, which is meiosis. Okay, so meiosis is just everything to do with the production of sex cells. And you'll see me and hear me talk about sex cells. They're called gametes. Okay, so the technical term for a sex cell is a gamete. These egg cells and sperm cells are genetically different every single time. Okay, even with hundreds of thousands of millions of sperm cells, they are all genetically different. Okay, if they weren't, all the offspring of the same two people would be identical. Okay, that's not going to be very good for variation. It's not going to be very good for reproduction. So very quickly then, meiosis is slightly different to mitosis because of this bit that I've circled in this red box here. Right? So mitosis is just simply DNA replicates, DNA splits. There's nothing much more to that. With meiosis, there's a second division where we get 4 cells instead of 2. And each one of those cells, we can look, if we look at the original cell, they've got 4 little lines in. These have got 2. That indicates that our 4 daughter cells have half the number of chromosomes. Okay, so it's known as haploid. So this haploid here is half. It's one set. So we have a diploid cell. We start with a parent cell, a diploid cell, and we end up with haploid cells. And it's very important these 4 gametes are slightly different because we want variation within a population. We need variation to allow this process of evolution by natural selection even to take place. What makes meiosis different is this potential for chromosomes to cross over one another and swap sections of DNA with other chromosomes, which you can see down the bottom right here. We've got a homologous pair of chromosomes. That means to say they are the same pair of chromosomes. Then they might come close and the arm of the chromosome, it's known as an arm, will touch, cross over, and then sections of DNA will physically swap from one chromosome to another. So what we end up with are chromosomes that are just ever so slightly different, and that when these split in half and one chromosome goes to one cell and one chromosome goes to the other, these chromosomes are no longer identical to the originals. So we have the potential for chromosomes to cross over here. So the first 2 daughter cells that are produced with the first division, they are not identical, but they're still diploid. They still have 2 sets. These cells here, these 2 daughter cells, have 23 pairs of chromosomes, but they're not identical. This is why it's different to mitosis. The second division produces 4 daughter cells, and I've already said that they're haploid. They have 23 chromosomes, not 23 pairs. And this is really important. The 4 daughter cells, now these could be 4 daughter cells that are egg cells, there could be 4 daughter cells that are sperm cells. We've got a cell that has 23 pairs of chromosomes, and we need, let me try and draw this. So if we have the sperm, the egg, we have 23 and 23. We need the fertilized egg to have 46 chromosomes, which is 23 pairs. Okay, so we need these cells here, which could be your sperm cells being produced, to have half the number, because it's going to combine with another cell that has half the number to produce the correct number. If we had the diploid daughter cells producing the sperm and the egg, we're going to end up with offspring that have 46 pairs. Okay, that's tetraploid. That's far too many chromosomes. That fertilized egg will not go any further than fertilization. It will destroy itself. There are processes involved in the body's mechanisms to stop an egg cell that has too many or too few chromosomes beyond a certain point from forming. So again, chromosomes are copied. They split first into two non-identical diploid daughter cells. We can see even here that we have slight crossing over here. We've got a change in color. Two new cells then divide again to form 4 haploid daughter cells. Again, you can still see just about, if I draw it on, we've got slight crossing over in all the cells. So they're all a little bit different, ever so slightly. This cell and this cell, ever so slightly different. This cell and this cell are ever so slightly different. To summarize, we've got mitosis and meiosis for what it is. Mitosis is the replication of body cells for repair or for growth, and you form 2 identical daughter cells in only 1 division. Meiosis is different because it's there to produce sex cells, which are gametes, that need variation for reproduction. It's the same as mitosis because you double the chromosomes to start with, but it's different because they divide twice and produce 4 non-identical haploid cells. And the non-identical nature of it comes from chromosome crossover. Mitosis happens all over the body, meiosis only in the ovaries and the testes to form the gametes. Mitosis has no variation, it's identical. Meiosis does, it's non-identical. There's always some sort of variation. Even if it's only very small, there is always some sort of variation. So there is our comparison between mitosis and meiosis. I hope that's cleared up a few things people always stumble on when they look at mitosis and meiosis. If you have any questions, please just get in touch and ask.